Hello, hello. Welcome to Awakening the Feminine Within podcast with your host, Miriam Bolcher. I'm excited because today's episode is about how being in your wounded masculine energy can be killing you. And it is not ideal for women to be in their masculine energy, or if they're coming from a wounded masculine energy place, if you have too much masculine energy and you're living too much in that, it can have some serious, really intense, damaging physical aspects to your health. If you are new to the podcast, we talk about everything related to feminine energy here, what it's like to live more in your feminine and open that up in your life. So I have a guest with me today. She is absolutely incredible. Her name is Dr. Patricia Petralba, and she is an amazing holistic women's doctor, and she focuses on women's health specifically. And I'm excited to have her here. Dr. Patricia, please tell us about yourself and give us a little intro.
Yay, thanks for that intro, Miriam, and I'm excited to be here. So I'm an integrative women's health doctor, which essentially means I combine the best of all worlds, Eastern, Western, and everything in between to get to the root cause. So you get to feel alive and you get to feel radiant inside out as a woman. Mm-hmm.
That is so important. So tell us about what brought you to focus on women's entire health, like just women's health in general.
You know, it was a bit of a long road. I was also leaning on to my masculine energy, which is, that linear, targeted, and rightfully so, because it allowed me to do so many things and accomplish many things. And then I had my own burnouts, and then I had my own feeling like I am not tapping into my highest potential. And naturally, I went into women's health because a lot of my patients and clients were women. And seeing now at least 15,000 women in 16 years of supporting women, it's a great need, and there's a lot of gap in how to really maximize that. How we're unique biologically, how we're unique psychographically, like our psychology and our energetics. And what I found is when we really master that part of ourselves, which is rooted in that feminine energy, our cycles, our creativity, our productivity becomes even more. I mean, what more power can we have than creating life, right? And not just life, human life, but in anything. We are the master creator. So I'll stop there on how I went here. But essentially, because women were not finding the answers in that conventional model, which is most of it is very masculine. No, when I say masculine, it's very like 1 + 1 = 2. It's very linear. And with us women, it's very cyclical and seasonal.
I love that explanation. And that, I think, is how most women feel about themselves, that it's not simple or it's not black and white, right? And
yes.
I think that is why women experience more frustration and end up in this place of not being in their feminine or feeling resistant to feminine energy, because most of what's out there in terms of explanation and specifically health are for men, right?
Right.
So,
right.
For you, what are some signs physically that the issues might be for a woman who is living in her wounded masculine? And how would you describe that for a woman to be in her wounded masculine or living too much in her masculine energy? What does that lifestyle look like? And what might she be suffering from?
Great question. I always love to see the framework of mind, body, spirit to see where you are, no? So if it's in the wounded masculine, meaning you are living opposite of cyclical, living opposite of seasonal, meaning you are handling yourself like you're a tree and you expect the tree to harvest and to bear fruits every single season. Okay? So what happens to that tree, which is you? Who expects that in the first place? Like, you don't expect a flower to bloom every time. And a woman is in a many ways designed that way. So when we go into that masculine, where perennial season outside the feminine cycles, on a mental level, we question ourselves. Number one, there's that guilt, shame, anxiety, and depression, because you want to reach a certain way, which is leaning more into that linear cycle versus seasonal cycle, like the moon. So then we feel like we are not enough. And so anxiety comes up because you still want to produce how your counter more testosterone driven males are doing it. So mental health is definitely affected, no? And then sleep gets affected. And from a body perspective, I see a lot of the fibroids because there is that hormonal imbalance now, right? The estrogen, the progesterone, and all other in-between hormones gets not in a symbiotic relationship. So masses are found, like endometriosis, which is like severe PMS, migraines, all these like bloating. So you're in dis-ease versus ease with your body, no? And what do they do so that they don't have those symptoms on the PMS in a masculine, wounded masculine way? We power through, right? Instead of like taking a pause, okay, I'm in my bleeding phase, or I'm having my premenstrual sensations, and I don't even want to pathologize those sensations because it's a good feedback. So instead of like looking inside, what is that you need? The wounded masculine wants to manipulate that and say, no, you take your caffeine, you take your anti-migraine, and you power through and you get things done. So then you build more of that hormonal disharmony, and then you have more of that heavy bleeding. And again, your body is giving you that feedback of, this isn't working, ladies. And then from a spiritual standpoint, and when I say spiritual, it's what makes us turned on. It's what makes us feel like, oh my gosh, I am so alive. Because you beat yourself up to that linearity in doing things, you're just turned off. Your libido now, you're not turned on by life. It's like extra work to connect. It's extra work to feel happy and successful, regardless of how much is in your bank, regardless of how much clients you have, or what your name is on the corporate world. If you're the president now, the CEO, it's just never gonna be enough because you're pushing down that feminine side, which is the flow, which is the one that is receiving and being that queen, too beautiful to move. And no guilt about that, no? And when you look at it, how is our bodies and menstrual cycles designed? It's designed literally to receive. We open our legs, we get a donation, and you don't even need to work hard to grow a human being. It is inside of us. It is a divine technology. Without doing anything, you just sit on your egg and it's going to process. And when does the masculine energy comes in? And even in labor, right? Most of that on Labor Day, we have those contractions, but we are just breathing through them. We're just like receiving all that help. Hopefully you're that way during your birthing day. And then the last push, that last masculine energy is the end, like 10 to 20%. I'm not saying masculine is bad, but when we're able to ride the wave of how we were divinely designed, we just create things easily. We create things more magnetically, meaning it's more on a no struggle, no PMS, good libido. And anyway, I'll stop there.
No, that was so beautiful the way you would describe that, because I think most women are feeling and are not aware of it, that they're feeling a sense of disorganization in their health, right? Like they're either not just feeling a sense of contentment in how they feel, and they're trying to fix it with doing more, right? And
Yes.
that is the masculine energy, and it's not the solution. The solution, from what you're saying,
Right.
is feminine energy, allowing yourself to receive, allowing yourself to feel, allowing yourself self-compassion, and allowing room for flow and ease, and to be able to decipher what your body's and your mental and your spiritual needs are so you're supposed to move with your health, not against it, based on some ideology that you have about how you're supposed to live your life, right? Because I know even for me,
Yes.
when I really healed my feminine, I had to go through like 3 intense months of doing absolutely nothing. And it was really hard to not feel lazy, to not feel like I was worthless, because I wasn't moving my body in the way that society expects you to, right? So how does a woman...
And that nothing?
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that nothing is not nothing. It's like that winter, no? It's that winter where everything is contracted. We're pruning the dead, right? We're pruning what is not working. And then we get to really enjoy that springtime when we allow ourselves to be in that like reflective mode and nothingness, stillness of winter. Our spring is much more beautiful.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And that, I think, you mentioned earlier on about being turned on and being able to see the type of beauty that you have in your life and to be able to enjoy it. And it really comes from this process, at least from what I've experienced, which is you do the internal work, you decide to allow yourself to receive, you decide to no longer push, and then you can go through this phase of learning how to turn on your feminine, basically, which is seeing the beauty and then being able to create the beauty and then living in synergy with your own physical body, which in turn, of course, is tied to the mental and the spiritual as well. So say a woman is currently in the throes of pushing and feeling physically, horrible, and is, feeling burnt out, fatigued, there's nothing left for her to give anymore. What suggestions would you have for her to help to start receiving and to be compassionate with her body? Because her body is telling her you are not living in synergy, right? Like your body's frustrated. How do you guide a woman in that process? Because it can be really trying.
Yeah, great question. I would say to anchor receivership from others, you activate and accelerate receivership when you receive who you really are as a woman. When you get to receive yourself and that chunk of that self, and I go back to the menstrual cycle all the time because it's our report card, it's our biggest coach, it's our biggest mirror. When we actually embrace that cyclical living and see the gift of the messages from our body, we can organize then our time and energy management in a way that helps us receive from external, and when I say cyclical, so our cycles, what happens is our hormone fluctuates, no? And you know how a lot of women, just that period when I'm PMSing, I feel like I'm a crazy person, I'm less tolerant, all the things that you don't like about yourself arises. And I love to reframe it in a way where actually that is when the veil of the conscious and unconscious is lifted. So when you're able to receive who you are in those moments, you're able to nourish yourself better and feel better getting nourished by others. Am I making sense?
Yes, 100% making sense. It's like it's the willingness to see all versions of yourself.
Yes. And if there's any practical thing that for anyone who's listening, and maybe some of them are not in menstrual cycling anymore, but the women's biology that is still connected, because everything is connected in integrative medicine, no? Mind, body, spirit. But the body, our cycles, is one of the best feedback mechanism how you're doing with your feminine energy. So we have 4 seasons in one menstrual cycle. We have the menstrual phase, which is the new moon, which is when I advise women to rest and reflect. And then we have the follicular or the waxing period of the moon, when we want to plan and initiate. And then we have the ovulation, which is like the main harvest season, fall, the full moon, where when we're ovulating, we want to connect and be visible because we're more receptive, right? I mean, when do you want to create a baby? When you're ovulating. When do you want to be visible to whoever will plant a seed in you? When you're ovulating. So in business, you want to connect more and be more visible when you're ovulating. And then lastly, on your after ovulating, that's when we're in our luteal, and that's when the moon is usually also waning, and that's when you focus and complete, and that's when usually PMS happens, or other, all these dis-ease that we feel. So we focus now on our needs. We put whatever projects that we have in completion, so that we're not all over the place. So this is a great framework that I encourage women. And per season, per 4 of those quadrants, the new moon, the waxing, the full moon, the waning, are 7 days usually per phases. So it's kind of like the winter, the spring, the fall, the summer. And in this framework helps us kind of fluctuate, be more rhythmical in our time and energy management. So you're not kind of I'm doing, which is masculine. No, it's masculine is the sun, so it's just rises and it just sets. But the feminine is the moon cycles, and that's why I use the framework of new moon, waxing, full moon, waning.
I love the way that you're explaining the menstrual cycle and how women should fall into the flow of it, because I think overall in society, we as women have been trained that our cycles are a nuisance, that they're in the way of our life. When in reality, it should be completely flipped the other way. It's no, we have to follow our cycle and let it guide us instead of us dictating and living a life that is only going to lead to burnout, frustration, or hormone imbalances. And that leads to a whole other discussion, I'm sure, about birth control and stuff like that, which we're not going to talk about today. But it's like, why not? I want you to tell us what it's like for a woman to live in flow. What does her life look like? And what is it like for her to live her life in a turned on way when she's living in flow with her feminine energy and with her cycle and with her health as it leading her?
Right. You know, what I've seen, and me personally too, is one, because you track your seasons and your cycles, so you're more connected to yourself. You know how a lot of women gets amnesia, like, oh my gosh, it's this time of the month. So there's that disconnect. You almost like forget this is your wiring and your firing. But when you connect and you track your cycles, you become more compassionate. Then you become more softer in your expectations. But you know how to leap in ovulation. You know, oh, it's going to be ovulation time. I'm going to be visible and connect. And then that's when you can actually, receive the help from that connection. But back to your question on how do women look like when they actually be in that flow, they're more self-compassion. There's not much of those PMS because you are already anticipating your highs and lows. You have already embraced that versus power through and like shove it down like, oh, it's that time of the month versus it's the time of the month. What will this bleeding, which is the rest and reflect, give me? What served me? What didn't serve me? When we actually allow ourselves to rest and reflect during that bleeding phase, it's such a game changer because when we bend, we get to leap. When we bend, we get to leap higher. You can't jump, right? And so our menstrual phase and that waxing phase is that figurative flow and feminine bend for us to leap during full moon, which is the ovulation. And I see less of, again, the PMS. I see less of the hot flashes and low libido beyond the menstrual ages because they've mastered being in flow. They do not disconnect. They connect the dots. And so psychologically and hormonally, you are honoring who you are. So you're creating that chemistry of like, oh, I know when I'm going to be turned on. Oh, I know when I need to go inside the cave and just hug myself. I apologize. My children are banging on the door. So, if there's one take home, you are a tree and a plant that blooms beautifully when you allow yourselves to have that pruning and winter season too.
Absolutely, because it doesn't make sense for a tree to bloom 24/7. And we wouldn't, number one, appreciate the bloom if it did that. And then number two, it just would lose the cycle, right? As you were saying, like women are secular, like they're supposed to ebb and they're supposed to flow. And if we can't see and honor that nature in ourselves, which is the feminine nature, then thus leads to an onslaught of health problems. And if you are seeing any kind of health problems or wondering, like, why am I struggling, with XYZ health problems, then this podcast might be that little wake up sign to do some reflecting. And what does it look like for you to entertain the idea of ebbing and flowing with your health, with your hormones, with your cycle, right? Because ultimately we cannot just be a robot and be an Energizer bunny 24/7. Like, it's not sustainable for anyone. And so Tell us more, Dr. Patricia, what it's like for a woman to work with you. Say they are experiencing a lot of health problems, and say it's libido, or maybe it's a hormone imbalance, or maybe they are having, a lot of food issues, or, they're having cycle problems or something like that. What do you help women with specifically? And what would you tell a woman to look for in terms of having someone help her in that area?
Yes. Great question. Number one, I would look for someone who is directed at root cause, because, there's so much natural providers out there, holistic practitioners. If it's a supplement or an herb or whatever energy medicine you're gonna go into, it can still act like a pharmaceutical where we're just suppressing the symptom versus really addressing, well, why aren't you living cyclically? Why don't you trust that you can produce even if you would rest? So that's one root cause, like trust issues, right? So a lot of mindset things I work a lot with, because quite frankly, I think it's so easy to prescribe something, to interpret your functional, nutritional and all these things. And I think how I set myself apart is my clients and I are informed by one of the most wise woman out there. And that is Lady Death. Which means I do a lot of soul alignment. Meaning, because no matter what supplement, no matter how much you exercise, no matter, you're a clean eater, if you're not living in alignment what your soul calling is, and if we didn't consult with Lady Death, everything will keep coming back. Because your mind and body will keep telling you you're not in alignment with why you're here. So I work with all those three framework. We make sure the north is clear. Why are you doing what you're doing in the first place? Then we reverse engineer. Okay, let's find the diet that feels peaceful, easy. Let's find your hormonal cocktail that works for you. And then we set also the mindset on how can you make that shifts and reframe and all that perception acceleration that we can do. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I love that so much, because I think for a lot of women, the symptoms become a huge distraction. And then they are like, oh, I need to problem solve, right? Which that's the masculine being like, I need to solve this symptom so I can get rid of the pain, except that by going down that avenue can actually just, number one, give you more issues, because you're not focusing on the root cause, right? Which is you're living a lifestyle that is not suited for contentment and being turned on and just having a more peaceful life and ebbing and flowing with the feminine. So ultimately, it sounds like someone has to really, number one, if they want to address the root, they should really work with someone who is going to have knowledge of both the, feminine, integrative, mental and spiritual and physical components of addressing all the root issues, which you do with your clients, which is brilliant, because ultimately, what good is it to take a supplement if you're just going to keep abusing your body to live a way that really truly isn't serving you? You're just throwing money away at a doctor and then also throwing your money away on a supplement or a drug, and then you'll lead back down to either more problems or you'll end up, right back where you needed to be in the beginning, which is addressing the root issue. So hopefully, this isn't meant to be discouraging, for the women who are having issues, but it's really meant to be just how can you be more open and receptive to what your body is telling you, right? Ultimately, like that's what the feminine is. The feminine is being open and being receptive, and regardless, and having no judgment of that. If your body is telling you, we're really struggling here and you need to, maybe adjust to living your lifestyle differently, then being open to that without reservation, right?
Absolutely. And from an empowerment standpoint, going back to how we were designed, that it's inside of us. Like, we honestly don't really need to struggle that much. Our creativity and our productivity is already inside our wiring. Especially when we allow ourselves to, again, receive, lean back, then we can leap forward when we allow ourselves in that lean back. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so without leaning back and being receptive, going and doing and creating is pretty much impossible.
Right. Yes.
Or it's at least probably not authentic.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So,
or like keep pushing, again, shows up with the other burnout and hormonal imbalances that I see a lot with women. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So tell us, Dr. Patricia, what kind of services you offer with your clients, and if you have anything upcoming, and how people can connect and reach out to you.
Yes. I love supporting women who, wants to get over that hump of burnout and really feel alive. They can see me in person with my medical practice here in Tucson. They can check out thrivelightcenter.com, or I also coach women globally. And yeah, they can also connect through my Facebook group, The Thriving Woman. I also have a 14-day self-love course, which is because, love is the highest healing frequency, and it's designed in a way where it turns on the healing frequencies inside our body. So those are the 3 ways to work with me. But I love connecting. I love getting to know women all over the world, and they can just connect with me through my Facebook group, The Thriving Woman. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Do you have any other tidbits or advice for women who are experiencing any physical pain or frustration and are wanting to live more receptively that they can start like today?
Today, I would say, how can you make space for the bend so that you can leap? How and who has modeled that for you? Because those women exist. And how can you be close and be in proximity to that? So either through someone with me, through podcast, but my number 1 is create space for those bend so you can leap. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, that is so powerful. So it's about allowing yourself to just take a step back, right? Allow yourself to just sit down, to rest, to be receptive and to be open and to receive so that you can then go and do. But you cannot have one without the other. And I think that is a powerful piece of advice, because us as women, we don't even realize it. Our subconscious minds are telling us to do and do and do and do and do. And then we don't realize that we haven't taken a minute to actually, designate tasks to our family or to helpers or to grocery shop people who can help us. And then which is hopefully why this podcast is going to be helpful for those that need that reminder that you cannot do all the time, and that you need to, in order to live in alignment with your physical health, you absolutely need to take a step back and to try and change your lifestyle so that you can, as you say, bend, and so that you can actually go and leap. And not only that, but leap with joy and leap with passion instead of just leaping, like it feels heartless.
Right. Yes. 100%. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Amazing. Well, that concludes our podcast for today. I highly encourage you all to go and connect with Dr. Patricia on Instagram, Facebook, and visit her Facebook group. And I really hope that you had a takeaway from this podcast today. I would love to hear if you do have any takeaways. You can follow me on Instagram, Miriam Bulcher, or Facebook, and come and just share. And we definitely would very much appreciate if you could rate the podcast and share this with a friend, and follow and subscribe as well. And thank you so much for listening. And I will see you all and talk to you in the next podcast.